Welcome to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons, helping you boost your health, energy, and productivity.
Kia ora, hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Thrive TV show. I'm Lauren Parsons, your host, and today I'm so thrilled to be joined by Gustavo Razzetti, all the way from Chicago in the US. So welcome, Gustavo.
Hi, Lauren. Nice to be here. Excited to be part of this show and talk about the future of hybrid work.
Yes, I'm very excited. I was just telling Gustavo that I read his book in a couple of days, just devoured it. And so today we're talking about remote, not distant. So I'm really looking forward to being able to unpack this and ask you tons of questions. We're going to chat a bit about what is culture and why it matters. Can you actually build a culture remotely? And what do we really mean by hybrid work and what the future looks like? So just before we dive into that though, Gustavo, can I ask you my this or that questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, so spots or stripes?
Stripes.
Okay. Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Okay. Would you rather speak 10 languages fluently or play 10 musical instruments beautifully?
Wow, that's a challenge because I cannot do either. So I don't know, languages. I'll go with languages.
Okay, nice. I'm sure you speak a few. Logical or creative?
Creative.
Okay. City or countryside?
Tough. In between, I would say a mix of both.
Okay.
Countryside, but close to the city. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And another location one, beachfront or mountaintop?
Mountaintop.
Okay, nice. So Gustavo Razzetti is a sought-after speaker, culture consultant, best-selling author. He's the CEO of Fearless Culture, a culture design consultancy that helps teams do the best work of their lives. His work has been featured in Psychology Today, the New York Times, Forbes, BBC, and many other publications. Throughout his career, he's advised companies in multiple business sectors, from Fortune 500 to fast growth startups. Razzetti is the creator of the Culture Design Canvas and the author of 4 books, including the recent Remote Not Distant, a roadmap to build a strong culture for remote and hybrid teams. So can you just tell me, perhaps to start with, what is it that you love about what you do now, Gustavo?
What I love, I think, is that there's a lot of room for creativity because we've been used to a workplace that was a one-size-fits-all. So basically, there was this 9 to 5, so to speak, model. And now we are in a moment in where there's a lot of opportunities to start rethinking how the future is going to look like. We know that what used to be no longer works, but no one knows what the answer is going to look at. Most importantly, rather than have a one solution that each company should adapt, it's a perfect time for companies to design unique workplace, unique cultures, and only rather than have a one-size-fits-all per company, also what happens at a team level. So we're seeing lots of opportunities in which we can design subcultures, the culture of certain teams within the larger organization. So that's really, really exciting.
Fantastic. Nice. I wanted to read something from your book. It's actually your first line. Your opening line is, "You don't need an office to build culture." So can you tell us a bit about that? Because I'm hearing a lot of leaders, and you've talked about it in your book, that are feeling like everyone needs to be in the office for us to have a culture. So tell us why you don't need an office to have culture.
First, I want to clarify, when I say I don't need, doesn't mean that I'm into no office. What I'm saying is having a physical presence doesn't guarantee you're going to have a strong culture. And I think that for example, I use this analogy that some people don't take it very nicely. There are many people that have been married for decades, so they have proximity. They live under the same roof, have to live, maybe they sleep in the same bed, but actually there's no passion, there's no love, there's nothing, there's no magic. So for me, the most important thing is that you have people closer in the same space doesn't mean that there's going to be a magic happening. So you need to be intentional, you need to be design it. There's a lot of research that shows that people in an office don't interact with those that are a couple of feet farther than when they are. So they basically interact with their team that they're working together and the people that are around. So there's a myth that people, for example, say, hey, we have the water cooler conversations, and that was what innovations and creativity basically came up. And there's no piece of evidence that shows that that was the case. So that's a myth, like many other myths that we live. most importantly, we know for sure that water coolers are the source of gossiping, criticism, and conversations that are having behind people's back rather than in front of those people that need to understand. So that those are not signs of good culture. We know that since we started with the open space, because actually it was sold that, oh, this is going to drive collaboration. Actually, it was driven by companies trying to save money, reduce the footprint so they can have more people in the same, in fewer space. So did people like open office? No, there's a lot of research that shows that no, it doesn't allow for concentration, doesn't allow for collaboration, it doesn't allow for deep work. So that's what I'm trying to challenge. I mean, I don't think that bringing people back to the office, it didn't work in the past to build a strong culture. It's not going to solve the problems that people have.
No, I see. And I think you can see both sides of that. So you might have people in an office that don't necessarily have a strong culture, but equally you can have people that are spread around or that are distributed that actually have a strong culture. And I think the guts that I took from your book was really that we need to be intentional and we need to build rituals to do that. So tell me, babe, perhaps another good place to start is, how do you define culture? Like, what is culture to you?
That's a great point. I mean, we have a lot of definitions, but in the end, I think that culture is, when it's working, it's invisible, and when it's not working, it's extremely visible. So what I'm saying is, look at, now we're in the midst of the World Cup. If you see the great teams that are performing well, you see that there's no friction. When someone makes a mistake, no one is blaming them. No one is shouting at their colleagues. However, those that have a culture that's not good, when they make a mistake, they immediately start shouting at each other, blaming, they ask for the coach to be fired and that kind of stuff. So the same happens in any organization. You notice since the moment you talk to, I don't know, the receptionist, when you go to an office, you see, is there tension? Is this a person like afraid of something? Well, those are signs that the culture is not a good one. So culture in our model includes three key elements. What we call the core of culture, which is the shared future. Why do we exist as an organization or as a team? What are we trying to achieve together? And that includes the purpose, values, and behaviors. The second element of culture is one of the ones that people usually think the most, which is the glue that brings people together, the sense of belonging, the emotional culture. And lastly, we have a functional side of culture that shapes how we collaborate and includes the meetings, how we make decisions, and the norms and rules.
Nice. I like that. And essentially you've just talked us through your design culture canvas, haven't you? Which is, I know it's got that heart at the center and it's that purpose, and so important to have that alignment with an organization's purpose, and then the emotional culture, which is actually what brought us together, Gustavo. So we connected through Jeremy Dean's community with the Riders and Elephants, talking about emotional culture, and then the functional culture and how we do things. So I like that. So tell me, why is culture important? And perhaps, feel free to share perhaps a story of, I don't know, one of your clients or an example of when it goes well or when it doesn't go well.
Yeah, culture basically accelerates everything that a team does. So it can get in the way or it can be an accelerator. There's this saying that culture, it's strategy for breakfast, right? I disagree with the saying, and actually there's no evidence that Peter Drucker ever said it, but people still keep sharing it in social media and LinkedIn. The point is, you need both. So it's not that culture is the solution to all your problems. So if you lack a good product, a good strategy or business model, your culture is not going to save you. However, you have those things in place, your culture can help you. So their companies have a strong culture, but lack the other elements. Their companies have a good product and lack a good culture. I think that what's happening in today, and there's a lot of discussion and debate about, for example, our friend Elon Musk that took over Twitter. And we don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you that it was a company that was performing pretty well, that was respected, that people love working there. They have a lot of bright engineers, and there was a system in place to make sure not only it was successful, but actually to protect people from bullying, the misinformation, and so on and so forth. It wasn't perfect, but there was a system. So when Elon Musk took over, not only he got rid of half of the people without even understanding who did what, just to basically save money or to show, hey, I'm the king here, I'm in charge, but also he dismantled a lot of great practices. So there was a culture of not only the way they work, but also understanding that the impact that social media had or has actually, it needs to be curated. You cannot just allow people to post whatever they want, because you know what happens. There's a lot of attacks, and here in the US we had a lot of bad evidence of how negative culture affects society, so with shootings in schools and many other places. So that's a perfect example of, if you don't protect your culture, everything that you've been building is going to affect your product. I don't know if, like, some people predict that Twitter is going to die, whatever, but I can tell you that there's a lot of emergent social media platforms where people are saying, hey, this is turning into a very negative, toxic place. We want to go somewhere else. Not only the employees, but also the users. Because to wrap up, culture is not something that affects your inner population. Culture affects your relationship with the outside world. So when we talk about values, we talk about purpose, it's not just how they guide our people, our employees, but also it guides how we interact with our partners and our clients. So when you screw culture, you don't only screw your employees, you also screw up your clients.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just that ripple effect, isn't it, that goes out to everyone. Yeah. So let's start to focus in on remote culture then. Tell us, I guess, I know that there's so much into this question, because it's essentially your whole book, but how do we build a culture remotely? What are the keys?
I think that the first thing that we need to consider, because people are still thinking in terms of black and white, binary terms, like either it's we're in the office or we are remotely, and actually people talk about working from home, which remotely doesn't necessarily doesn't limit it to working from home. You can work from other places, even our company locations. So that's important to clarify. The thing is, it's a combination of the best of both worlds. So if we take the extreme, for example, companies that have been working remotely 100% for many, many years, because it's not new for them, they still get together from time to time. So take GitLab. It's one of the model, like the poster child of a remote work. But every now and then, they bring everyone together in the same place to build relationship, to spend time together. They don't talk much about work, but actually it's about building those personal relationships. So it's about making time. Slack, most of the Slack teams now are working either a remote first or a mix, but intentionally, there are some teams that get together every quarter to build their culture. They discuss what's working, what's not working. They give feedback to each other. They go out and have dinner together, celebrate together. So they make time for that. So I think the most important thing about building culture, you mentioned the word being intentional. That's critical, but also understanding that it's not one or the other. It's about how you balance the best of both worlds. When we get in person, when we get together, what are we trying to achieve as a team? And when we're working distributedly, how are we going to operate to keep that culture alive?
Fantastic. Yeah. Tell me a bit about your thoughts on synchronous versus asynchronous work. So, meetings, phone calls, things that are in real time, as opposed to async work, which, where we have a delay. And I know you talked about a lot of the benefits for introverts, for more considered decision making. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think that once again, it's not the way the world used to operate was synchronous first. So basically, we understood that in order to collaborate, in order to do work, we had to act in real time and actually in the same place. But now we learned through the pandemic that we can work in real time remotely. The magic of a remote first or hybrid workplace is trying to work mostly asynchronous. No, it's not just asynchronous. It's combining the best of both worlds. When you work asynchronous, so not in real time, but at your own pace, it provides a calmness. It provides time for reflection. To your point, it's better for people who need time to think, to reflect before they share ideas. So a silent brainstorming, using decision-making documents for people to read what everyone else put and what are the questions before they jump into, okay, we should do this or that, really, really works magically. On the other hand, when you have an emergency, something that's really critical, or you want to align the team, working synchronously is much more effective. So my proposition is not one or the other. It's not replacing one mode and go to the other extreme. Is understand, and for each company is different, reflect in which case you want to use each mode, and then make the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of people will relate to a feeling of, oh, I'm in so many meetings, I'm in too many meetings. Do we need all these meetings? So I think rethinking some of the meetings that tend to become information sharing meetings and perhaps making those, hey, can we create a shared online document? Can everyone add and collaborate with their thoughts on this? And then at the same time, as you say, we don't want synchronous to completely disappear because we want to connect together. We want to celebrate together. Sometimes a quick phone call will resolve what could have been, 10 emails or messenger messages back and forward. So I agree. I think it's that blend of both. I love that. Yeah. Can you share some examples of, when you go into an organization, what are the sorts of things that you're seeing or recommendations that you're making?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that companies, to your point, are suffering is for a addiction to meetings. So they're creating meetings and meetings. And this has to do with two things. First, there's a lack of trust. So as people are not as visible as they used to be, we create meetings to control people, we meeting managers. On the other hand, we are experiencing what's called virtual presentism. So people are spending close to 1 hour per day in meetings or sending emails or whatever to show that they are visible, to show that they are working, pretending they're working just to make sure that they are not only managers, but also their colleagues feel, oh, these guys are being productive. And that's basically the result of a lack of trust. We need to work on that issue. On the other hand, there are functional things that, to your point, we can operate without needing to have a meeting. An interesting thing that we're doing with clients is we call the redo approach. So which meetings can be reduced in size, in frequency, in participants, or in attendance, so we make them more efficient. Which meetings can be eliminated. For example, we don't need meetings to sit and watch our colleagues tell us everything that they're doing. They can put in a document and we can find out without having to go to a meeting. We don't need to go to a meeting to hear our boss tell us what's going on. He or she can record a video and we can watch it at our own leisure. And then there are meetings. The D goes for do nothing, meetings that are already doing great. And then there are meetings that can be optimized, that the O for redo, in which we can make better participation to make the meetings more interesting. One company really took a hit on this, that's Asana, as a software company, and they basically tested within a team in which they cancel all their meetings. They basically reset their calendar and started from scratch. It was great because it allows them to, rather than make small fixes, to start thinking about how which meetings they really needed and which meetings no one remember they used to have. And there were, for example, by eliminating meetings, the ones that weren't replaced, they saved 37% of the time. So basically, it was a huge time saver. Wow. And then by reducing the amount of participants, the frequency and size of meeting, they reduced another 30%. And by optimizing another, so it was really effective. And actually it's funny because we're working with this model and then this case came and we say, well, now we have data to prove that our model works at a very quantitative fashion.
Wow. And that was Asana, did you say?
Asana, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, that's so interesting. So tell me about...
And so to your point, people don't want to get rid of meetings because we really need them. But then there's proof that when you cancel them, the work still goes on.
Yeah. Yes. I was recently challenged to block out days in my calendar for no meeting days. And I've just found even just doing that has been powerful. So that I only have 2 days a week when my calendar is open. And obviously there'll be differences in different organizations. And I think that's the biggest thing. It just seems to me that, yes, as you said, trust needs to go up and communication needs to not necessarily go up, but improve. We don't want people just posting comments, as you say, just to sort of prove that they're actually in the office doing something today and cluttering up the chat feed. We want people to have that high trust so they're just focusing on their work. So, and I know, again, this is a big topic, but what do you see as the keys to building trust then in a remote team?
That's a good point. I think that trust is an issue that has been harming teams for decades, but no one wants to talk about. And there are two approaches to trust. Either you assume that, hey, we trust each other and work well, or you work on the approach that trust needs to be earned. So there are many companies that operate, okay, you need to show me that you're trustworthy. That means that, for example, here in the US, it's very typical that many companies don't offer you, if you're a new employee, certain benefits like health insurance or others, and you need to earn them. You need to spend certain amount of time before you get them. There's a Australian company, another software company called Atlassian, very successful, which has an interesting policy in which they give people a voucher to pay for a vacation when they're switching jobs before they actually join as a Atlassian, before they actually work the first day. The company is already paying them for a vacation. So they show that they trust them even without having worked 1 hour at the company. So I think it's, once again, do you trust people? Show them that you trust, because trust is a two-way street and leaders have the responsibility to take the first step.
Yes, I totally agree. It's interesting, isn't it, when you think of that? Because I think for a lot of people listening, that would be quite shocking to think, wow, we're giving them a holiday before they even start. But it just makes me think, wow, people are going to come in refreshed, relaxed, engaged, going, wow, who is this organization that already trusts me? And I think often people do live up to what we expect of them. There was a great study, I think it was in the 60s, that they ended up calling the Pygmalion effect, where they told a group of teachers that they did tests with their students, and they told the teachers that this 20% of the class, they have amazing potential, when in fact it wasn't actually true. They were just randomly selected. But what they found is at the end of the year that those students actually had superbly outperformed because the teachers had expected that they would. And so perhaps even subconsciously they would pay more attention to them. And so I think that whole idea of we often live up to what is expected of us is really key in terms of trust. Yeah. It reminds me as well of Netflix. So I know changed their travel expense policy from being really detailed, you can spend so much on flights, you can spend so much on meals, to simply 5 words, act in Netflix's best interest. And in doing that, they reduced the expense. So it is quite amazing when we see these examples of building trust and extending trust, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. I think that in the end, it's people are going to react the way you treat them. It's like kids, if you treat them like stupid, they're going to behave like that, irresponsible. And if you treat your employees like grown-ups, they're going to behave like that. So the more you give them, people talk a lot about we need to build accountability. Accountability cannot be imposed. What you can create is a culture of ownership. Make people feel that they own their work, that they own their decisions, and people are going to do the right things. Control them, try to tell them how to operate, and people are going to disengage, and they're going to say, okay, if I'm irresponsible and you think I'm irresponsible, I'm going to act like that.
Yeah. Okay. So to get really practical, can you give me, enough that you've got leaders, say, listening and managers listening in, what are some of the key things they could start doing today that can start to make a difference to their team culture?
For me, the most important thing is talk to your teams. Many leaders are not reaching out to your teams. It's obvious, but saying, hey, let's reflect. Now, one of the things I invite people, one of the tools I share in the book is to reset the culture. Reset doesn't mean change everything. It means like when you reset an electronic and everything goes back into place, it's reflecting about what was working that we want to maintain, what parts of the software weren't working, so we want to reboot them, we want to reset them, we want to upgrade them. And I think it's a very important conversation to have with your team members into what things no longer serve us, what things we want to preserve, and what new things and practices we want to incorporate into our culture.
Yeah, and I think if you ask, I think sometimes we might be surprised by what people share, and even if you don't implement everything that your staff suggest or tell you they would like, at least they've aired their views and they are heard, and you can explain, I think, the reasons for the yeses and the nos and the not yet. I know you also talk about a thing that you call leveling the playing field. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, absolutely. In a hybrid environment, we have people that are having different work arrangements. So there are people that are going to have for their jobs have to work 100% in the office, other maybe fully remote, and people are going to be in between. So when it comes to communications, when it comes to benefits and stuff, we need to level the playing field to make sure that we're providing everyone with an equal experience. If you're having a meeting and you have people in the office, we're going to tend to involve the people that are present more than those that are joining remotely. So one thing that we need to do is to have a facilitator. Microsoft research suggests that the facilitator of hybrid meetings should be someone that's not in the physical office, so they can basically live that experience and the tensions when you're not in the room. And also it's important that we ask those who are outside of the room, physical room, to be the first to participate, that we use technology. For example, many companies have people joining remotely on this using their computers, so everyone has the same shared experience. If we are brainstorming, we use tools like Mural. Yeah, I'm in the room, but we're all going to capture the thoughts on a digital platform, so our colleagues not only can read, but also they can interact, they can make comments, and we are leveling the playing field.
Yeah. And so that for those that are listening in, so that tool is Mural, Mural, or there's Miro, Miro. There's probably lots of others out there. Apologies for the ones I'm not mentioning, but those are two that I've come across, and they're both very similar. It's like having a whiteboard with a whole lot of sticky notes, and essentially you're in a virtual meeting with colleagues and you're all working with the whiteboard with the sticky notes. And you mentioned before silent brainstorming. It's a little bit like that, where rather than let's do brainstorming and, the first outspoken people jump in with all their ideas and the introverts stay back and don't always get a chance to be heard. I love the idea that in these sort of settings, or even if you are in the room together doing a silent brainstorming round with real post-it notes, you can actually get everyone's ideas contributed and on the board, and then you can move them around and group them and think where to from here. So encourage people, if you haven't already, to use those sorts of tools, because at the end of the day, having it digitally captured as something that you can then keep adding to and coming back to is often more powerful, I find, than, as wonderful as they are, pages and pages of sticky notes, in the back of your car, perhaps. Fantastic. What are some other practical things that, as I say, as leaders are listening in today, where should they start? Once they've talked to their team, heard from their team, are there any other key things that you can see, I guess, that are small wins or simple things that we can do that can make a difference?
Yeah, I think that's important that we allow time for building interpersonal relationships. So there's a rule of thumb that at least 10-15% of the time that we spend on a meeting at the very beginning should be dedicated to, hey, touch base, how you guys are feeling, how are we doing, and do a quick check-in. We like to use what was the weather like for you next week? So using the weather as a metaphor, was it sunny, rainy, and people get talking about how, if they have too much workload, conflicting priorities, and so on and so forth. Another thing that's important is burnout. So many people are working too many hours, too long, they feel isolated. And it's not just because they're working from home, it's because the companies are not good at defining priorities. There's a lot of changes. Some companies are growing too fast, some companies are slowing down, so that creates a lot of panic, and they are demanding people to work more and more and don't noticing that. So if the flexibility is turning into, we never know when to start working, we never know when to stop working. So I think protecting personal time and create some kind of boundaries so people don't get burnout, that's also critical. So we need to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's so true. So what do you do in terms of boundaries, or what have you seen in terms of how do you switch off from your day, or how do you recommend that people do that?
I think one important thing is to understand what are the things that are critical. I wouldn't say life or death, but things that you need to definitely finish today, and what are the things that you can move to tomorrow or the day after tomorrow and know what's going to die, metaphorically, in the process. Another thing that's important is having some kind of ritual. So for me, the moment I put my phone upside down next to my computer and close my home office, that's okay. I'm going to basically shut down the day. But also, there's a coach that had a ritual that when he was facilitating in practice with the team, a basketball coach, he wants to make sure that the team finished with a shot made, not a shot missed. So in my case, I want to finish my work day with something that's going to bring me up. So maybe it's sending a proposal to a client, maybe it's posting something that I have written, something that it's like drives closure. So it's not just sending an email with hey, here's my availability for tomorrow, something that it's going to bring me up. So I wrap up my day with that ritual, but also in a positive way. So I know that, I feel good about it, rather than feel guilty for what I haven't accomplished.
Yeah, I like that. Nice. I tend to like using these sort of, it's green, so you can't see it on my green screen, but a post-it note that's got lines like one of these A6 size, and write out what's my top 5 for the day and prioritize it and stick that to the top of my laptop, so that then, even though there's always still things to do on my list, at least I know, right, what's the number one. And hopefully when I look back on yesterday's that I've actually ticked them off, relatively close to that order rather than getting sucked into the pebbles in the sand, focus on the rocks first. So very good. One question that I know a lot of people have been debating is what's the right balance? And I'm thinking that the answer is probably it will depend on the company. But in general, what are you noticing? I'm hearing a lot of people talking about 3 days in the office, 2 days remote, or vice versa. What are you noticing? Do you have any recommendation around that?
Yeah, I think in my book, I explained there are different hybrid models, and many people think that hybrid is a formula of 3-2, and that's completely stupid. Why? Because what's the criteria behind it? So my point is, you need to think about what type of work are we trying to accomplish as a team, and then think why and when should we get together and not, because sometimes it's better to get a team inside the room for maybe a week, and don't say not stop, 9 to 5, whatever the schedule is, and crush a project and finish a sprint and come out with something that, we work a little bit together, then I go back to home, and then maybe spend a month without seeing each other. So it's not about the frequency, it's about the purpose. So there are types of work in which we need to bring people together, and maybe we need to be together for 1, 2, 3, or 4 days in a week, and then we don't need to see each other for 2 weeks. So it's not about having that structure, it's about letting the work define how you work. And that's the most important, the biggest, I would say, opportunity that a hybrid workplace brings to life.
Fantastic. Yeah, I agree. I love it. And I think this will be probably stimulating lots of questions for people as they're listening in. So obviously really encourage everyone to get a copy of Remote Not Distant, because there's just so many wonderful examples in here. I love how you've obviously interviewed so many different leaders and drawn on so many stories of real examples and great ideas on ways to build team and connection. I love the checking in on what's the weather been like for you example. And I really agree with that. I think actually even having just connection only meetings where there's no work in progress, if possible, for teams just to connect. And I know that there's lots of Simon Sinek talks about having huddles, team huddles, and guides you through that process. And I think we need to ask those questions of how are people doing, not just what are they doing. So if people wanted to reach out or find out more about you, Gustavo, how do they do that?
There are many ways. They can go to LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I'm the only Gustavo Razzetti with double-Z-double-T, so that's easy to find. They can also look at our website, which is fearlessculture.design. It's fearlessculture.design, not .com. Okay. And you can find a lot of articles, free tools and stuff there in our website. And if you want to reach out, we have a form so you can complete and connect with me as well there.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. And if you're not already watching the TV version of the show here, head to thrivetvshow.com and you'll be able to get all of the links down in the show notes down below. And I know Gustavo is really generous. There's actually QR links throughout this book that give you links to be able to download the tools that he uses. And yeah, I'm loving getting the updates and the emails that you're sending through, Gustavo. So thank you for that. So as we wrap up, if there's one final thing that you'd like to share with our listeners today, what would that be?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of discussion recently. They were already in place when I wrote the book, but actually now it's becoming more pervasive, which is, are we going to go back to where we were? And I think that's not going to happen. There's going to be a lot of tension because we're in the midst of a huge change. So rather than resisting the future, be open your mind and experiment. The people that are experimenting, no one know what the future is going to look like, but for sure those who are experimenting rather than resisting change are the ones who are going to figure it out earlier.
Yes, I agree. I think experiment and let your team know that you're experimenting, get their feedback, continually evolve, and it's probably the only way forward, isn't it, really? It sounds so simple when we present it like that, like, are you going to resist the change? We'll go with it, even as hard as it is to do. So very wise words. So thank you so much for your time. It's been so nice to connect with you.
Thank you, Lauren. It was a pleasure to join you and also join your audience and talk a little bit about a topic that's I'm really passionate about, which is culture, especially in this transformational moment.
Yes, nice. Go forth and build culture. So thank you everyone for tuning in. It's been another episode of the Thrive TV show. Go out and thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons. Visit thrivetvshow.com to access the show notes and discover our fantastic bonus content. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring episode.